Ryan was not a soldier, not a fighter, and not a hero. He was an engineer, a man who knew how to keep machines alive when they wanted to fall apart. While others carried rifles and trained in combat drills, Ryan carried a toolbox and worked in the repair bay of Outpost 12. The outpost was a rough station on the edge of space, built where human explorers had formed an uneasy alliance with an alien warrior race. It was not the safest place, but it was the kind of place that always needed someone who could fix broken machines. On the morning that changed his life, Ryan was working quietly in the hangar. The smell of burned metal filled the air as he tested the coils of a damaged transport craft. Sparks hissed from the wires, and he muttered to himself as he switched the tool in his hand. He thought the day would pass as any other, with long hours of repairs and no real excitement. But then he heard heavy footsteps behind him, slow and strong, the kind that belonged to someone who carried both weight and authority. When he turned, he saw her. The alien warrior stood tall, taller than any human in the bay. Her armor was black and silver, scarred from battle, and across her chest plate ran a deep crack that exposed the strange fiber-like material beneath. Her name was Vera, though Ryan only learned it later. She was known among her people as a fighter of high rank, and humans in the outpost usually stayed out of her way. She walked with the kind of presence that made others step aside without a word. Her eyes settled on Ryan, sharp and unreadable. Without greeting, she placed a heavy piece of armor plating on his work table. The sound of metal striking metal echoed across the bay. "You will repair this," she said in a voice low and firm. Ryan hesitated. He had repaired drones, ships, rifles, even damaged robots, but he had never worked on alien battle armor. He studied the piece, then looked at her again. "I can try," he answered honestly. "But I will need to see how it fits with the rest of the suit. Armor like this is not built like ours." Her gaze did not soften, but after a moment, she gave a small nod. She lifted her right arm and released a lock. Part of the armor opened with a faint hiss, revealing layers of living fibers beneath the hard shell. It looked less like machinery and more like something alive. The sight held Ryan's attention in a way no engine ever had. He put on his gloves and picked up a scanning tool. "This design is different," he said, keeping his voice calm. He did not want her to think he was afraid, though the truth was that her presence made his heart beat faster. Vera did not answer at first. She stood silently, watching his every movement as if measuring him. Only the faint hum of machines filled the space around them. When he touched the edge of the fibers with the scanner, the armor reacted, twitching faintly like muscle under skin. Ryan almost pulled his hand back, but he steadied himself and adjusted the tool. "This is connected to you," he said. "Like a second body." Finally, Vera spoke. "It is not only protection. It is strength. To repair it is to touch me." Ryan froze for a moment, unsure what to say. The words carried weight, and he felt the challenge in them. But he remembered who he was. He was an engineer. Machines spoke to him in their own way, and he always listened. He leaned closer to the fibers and adjusted the scanner again. "Then I will treat it with care," he replied. He began his work carefully, adjusting the burned sections and removing shattered fragments of alloy. Each piece was heavier than it looked, forged from alien metal that was stronger than human steel. The fibers beneath glowed faintly as if they carried energy like blood through veins. His tools hummed as he tested the damaged links. Vera's gaze never left him. She seemed almost still, but he felt her sharp attention on his hands. He worked slowly, his movements precise, making sure not to break the delicate strands. Sweat formed on his forehead even though the bay was cool. It was not only the difficulty of the repair but also the silent pressure of her presence. Minutes passed, turning into an hour. Ryan kept his focus, but he could sense her studying him with the same intensity as if they were in combat. Finally, when he reattached a line of fibers, The armor gave a faint pulse of light. He stepped back, breathing slowly. "That should hold," he said. Vero lowered her gaze to the repaired section. She lifted her arm, flexing it slightly. The armor shifted with her movement, alive once more. For a moment, there was silence, as if she judged whether his work was worthy. Then her eyes rose to meet his. "You are touching me too softly," she said. The words struck him like a blade, though her tone was not angry. It was firm, controlled, but with something else beneath it. Ryan blinked, unsure whether he had heard correctly. "Too softly," he repeated. Her head tilted slightly, and her expression remained unreadable. "My people do not value soft hands. We value strength. To work with hesitation is to show weakness." Ryan tightened his grip on the tool in his hand. "Where I come from, soft hands are not weakness. They are precision. If I press too hard, the fibers break. I respect the design by being careful." The silence between them deepened. Vera did not move, yet her eyes seemed sharper than before, as if she were weighing his words. He stood his ground, not lowering his gaze. He was no warrior, but he knew machines, and he knew the truth of his craft. At last, she gave a slow nod. "We will see," she said simply. With that, she locked her armor back into place and turned toward the door. Her steps were heavy as she left the bay, leaving Ryan standing beside his work table, heart still racing. He looked at the tools in his hand, then at the empty space where she had stood. For the first time in months, his hands were not steady. Something in the way she had spoken stayed with him, a challenge and a mystery. He had repaired many machines in his life, but this was different. The alien warrior had not only brought him armor to fix. She had brought him a puzzle, one that was far greater than broken metal. And Ryan knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning. The next day, Ryan returned to the repair bay earlier than usual. He told himself he was only checking tools and preparing for another long shift, but deep inside he knew he was waiting. He could not stop thinking about the alien warrior from yesterday, about her armor that felt alive, and about her words that still echoed in his mind. "You are touching me too softly." It was not only a strange remark, it was also a challenge. Ryan was not used to being questioned like that. Machines either worked or they did not. He had never needed to defend the way he used his hands. But now, he felt as if he had to prove himself not only as an engineer but also as a man who could stand in front of a warrior. Hours passed slowly as he repaired a few rifles brought in by soldiers. Yet every sound of footsteps made him glance at the door. At last, in the late morning, he heard that same heavy stride. The atmosphere in the bay shifted, and he knew before he turned that it was her. Vera walked in, her tall frame casting a shadow over the work tables. Her armor was back in place, though it still carried scratches and signs of stress. She carried no weapon this time, but her presence was as sharp as ever. Without asking, she placed herself in front of him. "My armor still weakens at the right shoulder," she said firmly. "You will examine it again." Ryan wiped his hands on his cloth and nodded. "Show me where." With a motion of her hand, Vera released the locks on her upper plating. The shell opened, exposing the inner layers once more. Ryan leaned closer, and once again he felt that strange energy as the fibers shifted faintly like living muscle. The glow was dimmer this time, almost tired. He raised his scanner and adjusted it slowly over the section. "The links are unstable," he explained aloud, more for himself than for her. "It is not only the surface damage. The inner connection is out of balance. If I only fix the outside, it will fail again." Vera studied his face as he worked. "Then repair the inside," she said. Ryan hesitated. To reach the inner layers, he had to go deeper into the armor, touching areas that were even more closely bound to her body. He looked up at her. If I do this, it will be uncomfortable, he warned. This is more than metal. It is like I am working directly on you. Her gaze did not waver. Do it, she ordered. Ryan drew in a slow breath and reached into the armor with his tools. The fibers were warm to the touch, pulsing faintly with energy. They seemed to resist at first, as though they did not want foreign hands moving them. He adjusted carefully, steady but controlled, remembering her words about strength. When he pressed a little harder, the fibers reacted with a sudden jolt, and Vera inhaled sharply. Ryan froze. Did that hurt? He asked quickly. Her eyes narrowed, though her voice remained steady. Not pain. Sensation. Your touch is light. Too light. Be firm, or the armor will not obey. Ryan frowned, but he obeyed. This time, instead of brushing the fibers with a soft hand, he pressed and adjusted them with stronger movements. He felt them shift and lock into place, the pulse inside them growing steadier. It was like tuning a stringed instrument, but the instrument was alive and connected to the warrior herself. Vera's breathing slowed, and she stood perfectly still. Ryan worked with focus, each movement measured between care and strength. At last, the final line clicked into place, and the glow along the fibers brightened once more. He stepped back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. It is repaired. Try moving again. Vera closed the armor locks and rolled her shoulder. The plates shifted smoothly without weakness. She tested it by making a sharp strike motion in the air, and the armor responded without delay. She turned to him, her eyes sharp but different than yesterday. You improved it, she said. The weakness is gone. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. Because I listened, he replied. I used your way and mine together. Not too soft, not too rough. Vera's expression changed for just a second, almost like surprise. Then her voice returned to its firm tone. Perhaps you are not as fragile as you look, she said. Ryan chuckled. That is the closest thing to a compliment I have heard from you. She tilted her head, studying him. Among my people, compliments are rare. Respect is not given. It is earned. Then I will keep earning it, Ryan said. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The sound of machines in the bay faded into the background. Vera's eyes did not soften, but the sharpness in them carried less distance than before. It was not trust, not yet, but something had shifted. Then she closed the armor with a hiss and stepped back. You may continue to repair my gear when it fails, she said. Your hands, though strange, have some value. Ryan laughed softly, shaking his head. I will take that as a victory. She did not smile, but there was a faint change in her stance, as if his words amused her in a way she would never admit. She turned toward the exit, her voice carrying over her shoulder. Do not fail me, human. As she left, Ryan stood by his work table, his thoughts racing. Yesterday she had been nothing but cold steel, distant and commanding. Today she had allowed him deeper into her armor than any outsider should have been allowed. He knew she did not open herself to trust easily. For her, every gesture was a test. And though her words were sharp, her decision to return to him meant something. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had built ships and repaired weapons. For the first time, he felt that his work was not only about fixing machines. It was about building a bridge between two worlds that did not yet understand each other. The bay was quiet again, but inside him the silence carried weight. He knew this was only the second step in something far greater. The warrior had let him in just a little, and that meant the future would not be simple. Ryan cleaned his tools slowly, his mind still replaying her words. Not too soft, not too rough. That balance would not only decide how well he repaired her armor. It might also decide whether trust could exist between their two kinds. For now, he was content. He had touched the living armor again, and she had not pushed him away. That, in its own way, was more than victory. It was the beginning of something he could not yet name. Ryan walked through the outpost corridors with his toolbox at his side. The metal walls hummed with the sound of distant engines, and the floor vibrated faintly under his boots. He had just finished repairing a human drone when his thoughts returned once again to Vera. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Strong, unyielding, proud, but also mysterious. He wanted to understand her, yet every word between them felt like stepping into a storm. He told himself that their connection was only about work. She needed her armor repaired, and he was the only one willing to learn how it functioned. Still, he could not ignore the strange pull he felt whenever she stood near him. She carried the weight of her people's honor, while he carried nothing more than a box of tools. Yet, when he worked on her armor, it felt like both worlds balanced for a brief moment. Later that day, the outpost commander requested a joint demonstration in the training yard. Human soldiers and Vera's warriors gathered to practice maneuvers together. Ryan had no place in combat drills, but he was asked to stand by in case equipment failed. So he made his way to the yard, carrying his repair kit. The training ground was a wide circle of sand and stone, surrounded by tall metal walls. Human soldiers in light armor stood on one side, while alien warriors in heavy plating stood on the other. Their armor shone dark and strong, far heavier than anything human forces wore. Ryan spotted Vera among them instantly. She was taller than the rest, her presence commanding, her scarred armor gleaming under the light. When the drill began, Ryan watched with silent awe. Vera moved like a storm. Her blade cut the air with power, and her armor carried her strikes with perfect precision. The human soldiers tried to match her speed, but she overpowered them with strength alone. Yet what amazed Ryan most was not only her strength but her control. Every movement had purpose. She did not waste energy. She did not hesitate. But then, during a sudden clash, Ryan noticed something. When Vera swung her blade high, her right shoulder armor stiffened, locking for a brief second before releasing. The motion slowed her, and an opponent nearly struck her side. She blocked the blow, but Ryan saw her armor falter again. He recognized it instantly. It was the same section he had repaired yesterday. He had done his work well, but the deeper issue remained. The connection inside the fibers was unstable. He tightened his grip on his toolbox. He wanted to rush in and tell her, but he knew better than to interrupt a warrior during training. The drill ended after an hour. Dust hung in the air as the warriors pulled back. Human soldiers wiped sweat from their brows, while Vera and her fighters stood tall, barely breathing hard. Yet as the crowd began to leave, Vera's eyes found Ryan at the edge of the yard. She walked toward him, her steps heavy on the stone. "You saw it," she said flatly. Ryan nodded. "Your shoulder." It locked for a moment. "It is still unstable." Her jaw tightened, though she gave no sign of surprise. "You claim to understand what even my own armor smiths cannot see." Ryan met her gaze without flinching. "I do not claim. I know. This armor is alive, but it follows rules. I can read them. Let me show you." The other warriors nearby glanced at him with sharp eyes, clearly not pleased with his boldness. Ryan felt the weight of their stares, but he kept his focus on Vera. For a long moment, she stood silent, testing his resolve. Then she gave a small gesture with her hand. "Come," she said. She led him away from the yard, down a hall to a quiet chamber used for equipment checks. The room was dim, lit only by blue panels along the walls. Vera removed her shoulder plating with a hiss of locks and revealed the glowing fibers beneath. She stood still, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp as blades. "Explain," she said. Ryan set his toolbox on the floor and activated his scanner. "The fibers connect like nerves. When one line is misaligned, it causes strain through the whole section. The armor then freezes to protect itself. If I do not adjust the deep layers, it will fail in real combat. Vera's gaze did not move from him. You speak as if you understand our ways better than we do. Ryan shook his head. Not better. Just different. Humans build machines for flexibility. Your people build for strength. But strength without balance will break. Her eyes narrowed. Balance is weakness. A warrior must strike hard and endure harder. If armor fails, the warrior fights without it. Ryan paused, then looked up at her. But if armor can be better, why accept failure at all? The silence that followed was thick. Vera's face was unreadable, yet her breathing slowed slightly. She seemed to weigh his words with care. Finally, she lowered her head just enough for him to continue. Ryan reached into the fibers with firmer hands this time, remembering her lesson. His fingers pressed with strength, but he still used precision. The fibers resisted, then yielded, shifting into alignment with a faint pulse of light. He tightened a link, adjusted another, and soon the entire section glowed brighter. Vera flexed her arm slowly. This time, the armor moved smoothly without locking. She tested it again, faster, and the response was flawless. She looked at him with a gaze that carried something new, not only challenge but respect. You balance strength with care, she said quietly. Among my people, care is seen as softness. Yet you show it brings power. Ryan wiped his hands on his cloth. Among my people, strength without care destroys what it tries to protect. Both must exist. She studied him a long moment. Then she asked, do all humans believe this? Ryan smiled faintly. No. But I do. For the first time, a faint curve touched her lips, almost a smile, though it vanished quickly. She closed the armor plates with a hiss and stood taller. Perhaps your way has value, she admitted. Ryan felt a quiet pride at her words. He had not won her trust completely, but he had cracked the wall between them. As they left the chamber, Vera's warriors stood waiting in the hall. Their eyes moved from her to him, sharp and questioning. One of them stepped forward and spoke in their own tongue, a harsh sound Ryan did not understand. Vera answered in the same language, her voice low and firm. The warrior looked displeased but stepped aside. She glanced back at Ryan. My people doubt you. They believe only strength matters. They will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Ryan adjusted his toolbox and straightened his shoulders. Then let them. I am not a warrior, but I know who I am. And I will not step back. Her eyes stayed on him for a moment longer, then she gave a single nod. Without another word, she walked down the hall, her armor gleaming under the light. Ryan stood alone, but he felt stronger than before. He had clashed with her beliefs, and instead of breaking, both of them had begun to bend. It was not victory, not yet, but it was the beginning of something more. The sun over Outpost 12 burned with a pale light, filtered through the thin shield dome that stretched across the training yard. Dust clung to the air, and the sound of metal striking metal rang across the wide circle. Human soldiers and alien warriors trained together, though it was not always in harmony. Humans relied on speed and precision, while the alien fighters relied on brute force and endurance. Ryan stood near the edge of the yard, his toolbox resting at his feet. He had been asked to remain close in case equipment failed during the drill. He did not belong on the battlefield, but after his work with Vera, no one questioned why he was present. His eyes searched the line of armored warriors until he found her. Vera stood in full armor, blade in hand, her tall frame impossible to miss. The scarred lines across her plating were reminders of battles fought long before she ever set foot on this outpost. She commanded attention without speaking. Her people gathered around her as though gravity itself pulled them into her orbit. The drill began with a signal horn. Human soldiers rushed forward in formation, rifles lifted, their movements precise and organized. Across from them, Vera and her warriors advanced with measured steps, their heavy armor shaking the ground. When the two sides clashed, the difference between them became clear. Humans darted quickly, trying to use speed to gain advantage. They struck with rifles and short blades, testing weak points. But Vera's warriors endured every strike, their armor absorbing the blows, their strength overwhelming. Vera herself moved like a storm among them, her blades striking with power that sent dust flying. She was faster than Ryan expected for someone carrying such heavy plating. The clash continued for nearly an hour, and Ryan's eyes followed every movement. He noticed how humans aimed for balance, shifting stances to conserve energy. The alien fighters, however, struck again and again with relentless force, as if exhaustion had no meaning to them. Yet despite their power, there was something missing. Their strikes lacked adaptation. They followed strength alone, not strategy. When the horn blew again to signal pause, Vera called her warriors back. The human commander stepped forward to address both sides, praising effort but pointing out flaws. While the humans listened calmly, the alien fighters remained silent, their faces unreadable behind armored masks. Ryan could see the invisible wall between the two groups. As the soldiers dispersed to rest, Vera motioned for her warriors to continue sparring among themselves. She joined the circle and fought with three at once, her strikes sharp and merciless. Ryan watched with growing concern as she pushed herself harder than before. Then it happened. Her right shoulder stiffened again, the same weakness Ryan had seen earlier. For only a heartbeat, the armor froze, and her movement slowed. One of her sparring partners nearly struck her side. She deflected in time, but the flaw was clear. Ryan could not stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice rising above the clash of blades. "Stop. Your armor is locking again." The words drew every eye toward him. Human soldiers turned with surprise, while alien warriors looked at him with something closer to hostility. It was rare for anyone outside their ranks to speak during training, especially someone without armor or weapon. Vera straightened and lowered her blade, her gaze sharp on him. For a moment, silence stretched across the yard. Then she raised a hand to her warriors. They obeyed instantly, pulling back while she approached him. "You saw it again," she said firmly. Ryan nodded. "Yes. The deeper connections are misaligned. I told you yesterday. If you keep fighting like this, the armor will fail when you need it most." Murmurs rose among her people. One warrior stepped forward, speaking in their language, his tone hard and questioning. Though Ryan did not understand the words, he felt the weight of their challenge. The warrior's eyes burned with suspicion, as if asking why a human dared to speak of their sacred armor. Vera silenced him with a single gesture. She turned back to Ryan, her voice lower now. "You claim much for one who does not fight. Yet you speak as though you know my armor better than I do." Ryan held his ground. "Because I look at it differently. You see strength. I see patterns. If you let me explain, I can show you how to make it stronger." The warriors around her shifted uneasily, but Vera's eyes stayed locked on him. After a long pause, she nodded once. "Follow." She led him out of the yard and into a nearby chamber where equipment was stored. The room was dim and quiet compared to the noise outside. Vera removed her shoulder plating again, revealing the fibers beneath. They pulsed faintly, weaker now than before. Ryan knelt and activated his scanner. "These fibers are alive, but they respond to balance. If one link is under too much strain, it affects the whole system. That is why the armor freezes. It protects itself from tearing apart." Vera frowned. "Among my people, we are taught to endure even if armor fails. If it breaks, we fight without it. To rely too much on balance is seen as weakness." Ryan looked up at her. "But you do not need to choose. You can have both. Strength and balance. Care and power. That is what makes it better. Her eyes narrowed as she considered his words. Then she gave a slow nod. Show me. He reached into the fibers again, his hands steady. He remembered her lesson, not to be too soft. He pressed firmly, guiding the strands into alignment. The glow along the fibers brightened with each adjustment. Sweat gathered on his brow, but he kept working until the flow of energy was smooth. Now try, he said. Vera closed the plating and lifted her arm. She moved it slowly at first, then faster, then struck sharply at the air. The armor responded perfectly, no lock, no delay. For the first time, she looked at him not only with command but with something close to respect. You may have saved me from weakness, she admitted. Ryan smiled faintly. Not saved. Improved. That is the difference. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. She studied him, and he could almost feel the weight of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. Your way is strange, human. But perhaps there is more to it than I believed. As they returned to the yard, the warriors stared, clearly unsettled. Ryan knew he had stepped into dangerous ground. Yet he also knew that for the first time, Vera had listened, not only as a warrior but as a student willing to learn. The alarm came without warning. Ryan was in the repair bay, his hands deep inside the engine of a broken drone, when the red lights flashed across the ceiling. The siren blared through the corridors, sharp and urgent. Soldiers rushed past the open doors, their voices carrying a single word that froze the air. Attack. Ryan dropped his tool and grabbed his emergency kit. He had no weapon, but years of working on the outpost had taught him to move quickly when the alarm sounded. He followed the stream of soldiers toward the main yard, his heart hammering in his chest. The training ground that had been filled with drills hours earlier was now a battlefield. The shield dome above flickered as plasma fire struck it from outside. Beyond the barrier, enemy ships circled like predators. They were not the same as Vera's people. These were raiders, a hostile species known for striking outposts and leaving nothing but wreckage. Human soldiers formed lines, rifles raised. Vera's warriors stood beside them, their heavy armor glowing as they activated their weapons. The alliance between human and alien was about to be tested for the first time in real combat. Ryan spotted Vera near the front, her blade drawn, her stance tall and fearless. Her voice carried across the yard as she gave orders to her warriors. She was the center of their strength, and they followed without hesitation. The shield dome cracked under heavy fire, and then the enemy poured through in burning dropships. The yard erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts lit the air. The ground shook with explosions. Human rifles fired in rapid bursts while Vera's people charged headlong into the enemy with blades and shields. Ryan crouched behind a wall, his hands gripping his kit. He told himself he had no place here, but his eyes stayed fixed on the battle. He watched Vera move like a storm, cutting down enemy raiders with sharp strikes. Her armor gleamed with every motion, the living fibers glowing bright. She fought with strength that seemed unshakable. Then it happened. Her right shoulder locked. Ryan saw it instantly. In the middle of a strike, her armor stiffened for a heartbeat. It was the same flaw he had warned her about. She forced through it, blocking an attack, but the delay was enough for an enemy raider to press harder. Another blow struck her side, and she staggered back. Not now, Ryan whispered to himself. His mind raced. He knew he had repaired the section. If it failed again, then something else was wrong. Vera fought on, refusing to yield, but the weakness appeared again minutes later. Her movements slowed at the worst times, and Ryan realized the truth. This was no ordinary failure. The armor was not only damaged. It had been tampered with. He grabbed his kit and ran forward. Blasts shook the ground, but he pushed through the chaos. A soldier shouted for him to fall back, but he ignored it. His eyes stayed on Vera, who fought 3 raiders at once, her strength carrying her through even as her armor betrayed her. Ryan reached her side and shouted over the battle. "Your armor is sabotaged. I need to fix it now." Her blade cut through an enemy as she turned her head sharply toward him. "This is no place for you, human. You will fall if I do nothing," Ryan shot back, his voice fierce. "Trust me. Just this once." For the briefest moment, her eyes locked on his. Then, with a sharp nod, she shifted her stance to guard him. Ryan dropped to one knee beside her and opened the shoulder plating. Energy pulsed wildly inside, out of rhythm. His tools moved fast, but every second felt too slow. He pressed into the fibers, his hands firm, not too soft, not too rough. Just as she had taught him. Blades clashed above him. Plasma fire hissed against shields. Vera stood like a wall, striking down raiders as they tried to reach him. Sweat poured down Ryan's face as he searched for the flaw. Then he found it. A hidden shard of metal was embedded deep inside the fiber line. It was not random damage. It was a device, small and sharp, designed to disrupt the flow of energy. Sabotage. Someone had placed it inside her armor long before this battle. Ryan's heart pounded as he yanked it free. Sparks flew, and the fibers flared bright. He pressed his tool against the exposed line, forcing it back into balance. The armor responded, the pulse stabilizing. "Done," he shouted. "Try now." Vera swung her arm, and the armor moved with perfect speed. She struck hard, her blade cutting down the last raider in front of them. The glow across her armor surged with renewed power. She turned her head toward him, her eyes sharp but filled with something new. "You risked your life," she said over the roar of battle. Ryan rose to his feet, gripping his kit. "I told you. Trust me." Together they moved, Vera leading with her blade while Ryan stayed close enough to watch for further malfunctions. With her armor restored, her strikes were unstoppable. The enemy faltered, their lines breaking under the combined force of human rifles and alien blades. The battle stretched on, but slowly the tide turned. The raiders, seeing their assault failing, began retreating toward their ships. Soldiers cheered as the last enemy broke through the shield and fled into the sky. The outpost shook with the sound of victory. When the yard finally quieted, Ryan leaned heavily on his kit, exhausted. Vera stood beside him, her armor scarred but alive with power. Her warriors gathered around her, their voices raised in their own tongue. Some looked at Ryan with surprise, others with suspicion, but none denied that he had stood in the fire with them. Vera turned to him. "You discovered what my own people could not." "Sabotage." Ryan nodded. "Someone wanted your armor to fail at the worst time." Her eyes narrowed, sharp as steel. "This is more than battle. This is betrayal." He felt the weight of her words. Whoever had planted the device was not a random enemy. It was someone with access, someone close. The thought sent a chill through him. Vera lifted her blade high, and her warriors fell silent. Her voice carried across the yard. "Today we stood together. Human and warrior. And we did not fall." The soldiers cheered, but Ryan only watched her. In that moment, she was not just a fighter. She was a leader, fierce and unyielding. And though he had no blade, no armor, he knew he had become part of her battle. As the noise faded, Vera looked at him once more. "You have earned more than respect, Ryan. You have earned place among us." For the first time, Ryan felt that his hands, made for tools and wires, had carried more weight than any weapon. But he also knew this victory was not the end. The hidden weakness in her armor was only the beginning of a much larger threat. The night after the battle was strangely quiet. Smoke still curled from the damaged walls of the outpost, and the ground bore scars from plasma fire. The shield dome flickered weakly, a reminder of how close the raiders had come to breaking through. Soldiers moved slowly across the yard, clearing debris and checking on the wounded. Ryan sat on a metal crate, his tools spread around him. His hands trembled from exhaustion, but his mind refused to rest. The small shard of sabotage lay on the table before him. It was a twisted piece of metal, harmless now, but its design was unlike anything he had seen before. It was too precise, too deliberate. Someone had wanted Vera's armor to fail, and that meant someone inside the Alliance was working against them. Vera approached, her armor repaired enough to walk but still glowing faintly from battle. She stood tall even in silence, her presence commanding the space around her. "You look at it as if it might speak," she said, nodding at the shard. Ryan rubbed his eyes. "Maybe it already has. Whoever planted it wanted you dead. Not just defeated in battle, but gone. And if they succeeded, the rest of us would have fallen too." Her jaw tightened. "I do not fall easily. But you are right. This was not the work of raiders. They fight with brute force, not hidden tricks. Someone else plays a deeper game." Ryan hesitated before speaking again. "Do you trust all of your warriors?" Vera's gaze sharpened. "Every warrior swore blood oath to me. They would die before betrayal." "But still," Ryan pressed gently, "the shard was inside your armor long before today. Only someone close could have placed it there." Her silence said more than words. The thought was poison, but it could not be ignored. She reached down, picked up the shard, and held it in her armored hand. For a moment, the fire in her eyes dimmed. Then she clenched her fist around it. "We will find the one who did this," she said firmly. The next morning, the outpost gathered in the central hall. Human commanders stood on one side, Vera's warriors on the other. The air was thick with unease. The victory over the raiders should have brought celebration, but suspicion now hung heavier than smoke. Commander Holt, the human officer in charge, spoke first. "We all saw what happened yesterday. Someone tried to weaken our defenses from within. Until we know who, none of us are safe." Vera stepped forward, her voice like steel. "This shard was planted in my armor. Whoever did it sought to strike not just at me but at the unity between us. A blade in the shadows is more dangerous than 1,000 ships." The warriors murmured, their voices low and uneasy. Some glanced at the humans, others at their own comrades. Trust, once firm, now cracked. Ryan stayed near the back, watching carefully. His eyes searched the faces of the warriors. Some looked shocked, others angry, but one or two held their expressions too still. He tucked the thought away. When the meeting ended, Vera approached him privately. "You saw what I did. Doubt spreads fast. If we cannot find the traitor, the alliance will shatter." Ryan nodded. "Then we need proof. Not just suspicion." Together they began their search. Ryan examined every suit of armor in the repair bay, checking the energy lines, the fibers, the smallest hidden parts. Vera spoke with her captains, questioning their movements, testing their loyalty. But no answers came. The saboteur was careful, leaving no trace. Days passed, and tension grew. Small arguments broke out between soldiers and warriors. Whispers filled the halls. Some accused humans of planting the shard, saying they feared Vera's strength. Others claimed one of Vera's rivals had betrayed her. The outpost, once united, now stood divided. One evening, Ryan worked late in the bay, scanning a piece of damaged armor. His mind was heavy with failure. He thought of giving up when a faint mark caught his eye. A tiny symbol etched into the fiber, hidden deep inside the line. It matched the mark on the shard he had removed from Vera's armor. His heart raced. This was no accident. Someone had a pattern, a signature left behind. He rushed to Vera's quarters and showed her the discovery. She studied it closely, her face unreadable. "This mark," she said slowly. "It belongs to a faction within my people. Not all of us agreed to this alliance. Some see humans as weak, unworthy of standing beside us. To them, I am a traitor for choosing your side." Ryan felt the weight of her words. "So the traitor isn't just one person. It's a faction." She nodded grimly. "Yes. And if they move openly, they will not stop with sabotage. They will strike until the alliance is broken." The truth hit Ryan hard. This was bigger than sabotage. This was a shadow war, hidden inside their fragile partnership. Later that night, they stood on the walls of the outpost. The stars burned bright above them, and the air was heavy with silence. Ryan looked out at the endless sky. "Why do they hate us so much? We've done nothing but try to survive." Vera's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Because survival is not enough for them. To them, strength means ruling, not sharing. They see unity as weakness. But I see it as power." Her words carried a weight that stirred something inside him. She was not just a warrior. She was a bridge between two worlds, and now that bridge was under attack. He turned toward her. "Then we fight together. Not just against raiders, but against the ones hiding in the shadows." For the first time in days, she allowed the smallest smile. "You speak like a warrior now." The night deepened, but neither of them left the wall. They stood side by side, two figures against the vast sky, knowing the battles ahead would test not only their strength but also the fragile bond between their people. The sun barely touched the horizon when the alarm sounded again. The outpost, already scarred from previous attacks, trembled under heavy footsteps and the roar of engines. Ryan jumped to his feet, grabbing his toolbox, his mind racing. The shadows he and Vera had discovered were moving, striking faster than anyone expected. Vera was already at the yard, her blade in hand, her armor glowing faintly in the dim light. Her warriors formed a tight circle around her, while human soldiers lined the perimeter with rifles raised. The enemy came not in small numbers, but in waves, cloaked in dark armor, faster and stronger than the raiders they had fought before. Ryan ran to her side. "It's them. The faction you warned me about," he shouted over the roar of engines. Vera's eyes narrowed. "They strike at unity. If they succeed, this alliance ends today." The first wave of attackers breached the outer line. Vera moved like a whirlwind, her blade cutting through the first few foes with precision. Sparks flew as metal met metal, and the air burned with energy. Her armor responded flawlessly, no hesitation this time. Every strike, every move, was controlled strength. Ryan stayed close, keeping an eye on her armor, ready to repair anything that failed. He knew he could not fight like her, but he could keep her alive. He ran toward the first fallen warrior, adjusting energy lines and repairing damaged fibers on the armor. Each pulse of light under his hands was a heartbeat he could feel. The attackers pressed harder, and soon Vera's warriors were surrounded. One of the human lines faltered under a heavy strike, and a soldier cried out. Ryan's heart raced. He adjusted the glowing fibers on a warrior's shoulder plating, restoring their mobility just in time for them to block a fatal blow. Vera fought her way toward him, every motion deliberate. "They know our weakness. They have watched, studied, and prepared." Ryan nodded. "Then we give them no weakness to find." Together, they became a force of calculated power. Vera's strikes created openings, and Ryan's precise repairs ensured that every warrior's armor held under strain. The attackers grew frustrated. Their first waves fell, then regrouped, and attacked with even more force. During a brief pause in the chaos, Ryan looked around. The faction had infiltrated deep into the outpost, moving faster than anyone expected. Vera's warriors were holding their ground, but their numbers were thinning. "We need to push them out," Ryan said. Vera's eyes glinted with determination. Then we lead them away from the civilians. They moved as one, Ryan following her through the maze of corridors and training grounds. Her blade struck with deadly precision, but she guided the attackers toward open areas where her warriors could fight without endangering the outpost. Ryan moved among them, repairing damaged plating, aligning fibers, and keeping the energy flowing. At last, they reached the central chamber. The enemy attacked in a concentrated wave, their strength overwhelming. One of the warriors fell, and a human soldier struggled under a heavy strike. Ryan leapt forward, adjusting the soldier's armor and giving him just enough protection to block the next attack. Vera faced the leader of the faction, a warrior taller and stronger than any she had fought before. Their blades clashed with a sound that shook the chamber. Sparks flew with every strike, and the glowing energy of their armors lit the room in a harsh blue light. "You fight well," the leader said. "But you cannot protect them all." Vera's eyes burned. "Strength without unity is nothing. You will learn that today." They moved faster than human eyes could follow, blades flashing, armor glowing, every strike calculated. Ryan stayed close, moving between warriors, repairing as needed. He had learned to anticipate the armor's reactions, guided by the subtle shifts of energy beneath the plating. Each adjustment gave them the edge they needed. Minutes stretched like hours, but slowly, the tide turned. The attackers grew tired, their strikes less precise. Vera's warriors pressed forward, supported by humans who had regained their courage under her leadership. Finally, the faction leader made a desperate move, aiming to strike Vera down. Ryan saw the motion and shouted a warning. With a swift adjustment of her armor's energy lines, the strike was blocked and deflected. Vera countered immediately, her blade striking true. The leader stumbled and fell to the ground, defeated. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader fall, began to retreat. Vera and her warriors pursued just far enough to ensure they would not return. Silence fell over the outpost. The faint hum of repaired armor and cooling weapons was the only sound. Ryan leaned against a wall, breathing heavily. He looked at Vera, who stood in the center of the chamber, her armor scarred but alive with energy. She turned to him, her eyes softer than they had ever been. "You did more than repair armor today," she said. "You kept us alive. Without you, this outpost would have fallen." Ryan smiled faintly, exhaustion weighing on him. "I only did what I knew. You gave me the chance." Vera's gaze lingered on him. "You are not a warrior in the traditional sense. But today, you fought like one in your own way. That is what matters." The humans and alien warriors began regrouping, repairing what had been damaged, tending to the wounded. Ryan moved among them, fixing armor and machinery, his hands steady even after the chaos. The Alliance, tested in fire and shadow, had survived. Later, when the sun finally rose, casting pale light across the outpost, Vera stood with Ryan on the highest platform. They looked out at the horizon, knowing that the threat of betrayal had not ended entirely, but also that the unity they had forged in battle was stronger than fear. "You have changed my view of strength," Vera said quietly. "Power is not only force. It is protection, care, and understanding." Ryan nodded. "And I have learned that courage is more than holding a tool or weapon. Sometimes it is standing where you are needed most." They shared a long look, the understanding between them unspoken yet complete. Together, human and warrior, they had faced the shadows and survived. Together, they would rebuild, stronger than before. The outpost behind them buzzed with life, the survivors repairing what had been broken. The Alliance had been tested and had endured. And Ryan, the engineer who had only wished to repair machines, had found a place in a story far larger than he had imagined, standing beside a warrior who had taught him the meaning of true strength. The future was uncertain. Threats still lingered beyond the stars. But for now, in this moment, they had won. and that was enough to build hope for what was to come.